Well, hello, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the March Essential Vegan Desserts live event for Rouxbe. This is a really special live event because my friend and colleague, Chef Kathy Gold, is going to tell us, we're going to take a real deep dive into vanilla, a subject that I'm very interested in. Many of you know I wrote a book called Vegan Chocolate, and I really like chocolate, but vanilla is an ingredient that I think pulls everything together. Before we get started, I want to just take a few minutes to welcome everyone, of course, guests, current students, former students, who's ever here. Thank you for spending this time with us. On your screen on the right-hand corner, there's a question and answer area, and it's super easy to just type a question in. I will be answering some of the questions, and I'll be sending many of them over to Chef Gold to answer as well. I want to take just a moment to recognize my Essential Vegan Desserts students, and the work that's coming in is spectacular. I just love grading your work. Thank you very much for everything that you're doing, your attention to detail, and all of it. So it's just wonderful. Keep it going. If you haven't yet joined the Essential Vegan Desserts Facebook group, Patrick has the link in the group, in the chat. So go ahead and join that. That's a great place to ask, gee, I need a new blender. What kind do you like or don't like? Things like that. Share some photos and ask any kinds of questions. For questions of a technical nature, write to support@rouxbe.com and someone from the team will get back to you quickly. And you can always reach out to me at Fran@rouxbe.com, and that's for anyone here. So without further ado, I want to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Chef Kathy Gold. And I'm going to read from this paper because I don't want to miss anything. After a successful 20-year career in finance as a portfolio manager, Chef Kathy Gold followed her passion into the kitchen, training at Le Cordon Bleu. In 2005, she opened In the Kitchen Cooking School, a cooking school and event space in Haddonfield, New Jersey, and I have been there. Kathy has appeared as a guest on the national public radio program Radio Times, and CNBC featured Kathy in Escaping the Cube, a special that highlighted her career path from Wall Street to the professional kitchen. Chef Gold's cooking classes are amazing. They're fun, super informative, and obviously now online. So anyone who's interested in taking a class with Kathy can just reach out to her by email, or really, you ought to follow Kathy on Instagram, Chef Kathy Gold, and In the Kitchen Cooking School, you can always send her a DM. Kathy, when I moved to, I didn't tell you this important part, but Kathy was a 3-term member of the Les Dames d'Escoffier International Board of Directors and is the past president of Les Dames d'Escoffier Philadelphia. And it was Kathy who brought me into Les Dames when I moved to Philadelphia. It's a wonderful group. And right now, I'm super happy to introduce you to my friend, Kathy Gold, who's going to school us in vanilla. What happened was I was just talking to Kathy one day about vanilla, and she had so much information. And she said, well, I've really studied it and I've given talks. So I said, please, would you come and do this for the Essential Vegan Desserts Live event? So hi, Kathy. I'm glad to see you. I want to know first, what I know that vanilla beans are part of grow from an orchid plant or from orchid plants. And I have heard that I know that they have to be hand pollinated at a very particular time. And when I was thinking about it, I thought, I wonder if historically they were pollinated maybe by a particular bee or they weren't. So can you talk to us about that first?
Yes. So the original vanilla orchid, and hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here, I should say. The original vanilla orchid was found in Mexico very, very early on. And in those times, it was pollinated by hummingbirds as well as the Melipona bee. And it grew prodigiously. And the first uses of vanilla were historically worn as an amulet to protect from evil spirits and in rituals. And it wasn't until later that it was discovered that it had a flavor and could be useful for that as well. And then the vanilla orchid made its way across the seas to the Reunion Islands, which is what we call the Bourbon Islands as well. And by the way, when we say bourbon vanilla extract, it doesn't mean that it has bourbon in it. It's the Bourbon Islands, and then to many other parts of the world. But when it got to Madagascar in the Bourbon Islands, they forgot to bring the bees with them. And so they noticed that although they did have the gorgeous flowers, they didn't have any fruit being produced. And so it wasn't until the 1800s that a botanist realized that although some of them were naturally pollinated by insects, nothing like what they were expecting as a crop. And so a botanist discovered how they could hand pollinate. And today, hand pollination of vanilla all over the world is actually what they do. It's consistent. You know the result is going to be exactly what you want, and you have a better yield rather than waiting for any insects or anything else to pollinate. And this hand pollination is one of the reasons the vanilla is high as it is. And I think we have a picture of a beautiful vanilla orchid that we can see. And the colors are gorgeous, usually creamy white. Different varieties of vanilla will have a slightly different orchid color, but generally they're all about the same. And during the pollination process, it has to be done within 24 hours of the flower opening. And so it's a really a rush kind of a thing. So,
well, that would be one reason that the beans are so expensive. I'm wondering if the recent upsets in weather have also contributed to the sky high price of pure vanilla.
In 2018, there were devastating weather effects, lots of tornadoes and monsoons that pretty much wiped out the entire crop in Madagascar. Luckily, it doesn't take more than a year to regenerate. But during that time, the price of vanilla was $600 a kilo, which is an astronomical price. In my use of vanilla, that's the highest it's ever been, although historically it does go up and down. But boy, did that really throw a kink in everybody's works, and it affected everybody across the board. So all of the bakers who were then coming to me in our local area to see what kind of vanilla I still had on the shelves in our boutique, to the industries that use vanilla, which are, aside from the food, it's also used in medicines and in interesting things like tire production, where the fragrance of vanilla is used to mask unpleasant flavors. And then also, of course, cosmetics is a huge user of vanilla. But they grow,
yeah,
it takes about 3 to 5 years for vanilla vines to start producing. And then once they are flowering and producing fruit, it takes about 5 to 7 months for them to be ready to harvest. And so it's a process. But during that time of the horrible weather in Madagascar, all of the other vanilla producing countries really ramped up their production to meet the demand. And because also, of course, it's a huge cash crop. And so they were looking forward to being able to take advantage of those prices being as high. The good news is that the prices have come down considerably. It's almost half of what it was in 2018.
Well, that is really good news. That's for sure. I mean, there are so many different, well, before I go to the different kind of vanillas, because I've got a whole bunch here that I wanted to talk to you about, and I know you have quite a few more, a lot more. Do you have, I was thinking about the tasting of vanilla. Now, if I ask people say, well, what is your favorite chocolate? Or, you know, what chocolate should I use? And I say, well, as long as you stay within the percentage of the chocolate that's listed in the recipe, the one to use is the one that tastes good to you. But how can you can't taste vanilla, can you?
Right. It's really difficult to find a bean and know that that's the flavor that you're looking for. So in order to check the vanillas and taste what you want and the properties that they have, the easiest way is to do a custard, which takes a little bit of work. And so what we say is produce a quantity where you can then mix in the different vanilla, either extracts if that's what you're using, or the pods that you can, the beans that you scrape from the pods, and then taste and see what you like. Let them sit for a while so that the flavors can meld, and then you'll be able to taste.
That's a really great idea. Thank you. I actually made some vanilla cream, and the recipe is in the event document. But I was going to do that. You know, I always like to divide things up and put some vanilla bean paste or caviar. You'll tell us what's the preferred term. And I have double fold vanilla and single fold vanilla and a couple of different brands. And it is a way to taste. It's subtle. I would have to really train myself to do that. I'd like to know what you think about vanillin rather than pure, you know, as compared to pure vanilla extract.
Vanillin is the form of vanilla. It's industrial, and we say fake vanilla. It's not really said that way, but 95 to 98% of the uses of vanilla are the artificial vanilla. So it has a big use in the world, and it's much less expensive. It's really complete chemicals, and so it doesn't have any vanilla in it at all. And so when we're using vanilla, we're using such a minute quantity that it's really worth your while to either use a bean, if that's what the recipe is going to call for, or the extract.
Thank you. Kathy, when you use the bean and you have that beautiful pod left over, what do you do with the pod? Do you make vanilla sugar? Do you make, I think later on you're going to tell us about, yeah. So about how you have to use a lot of beans and leave it for a long time to get the vanilla flavor in the sugar.
It doesn't really take that long. In about 3 days, you'll be able to taste the vanilla quantity in your sugar. Yes, and I use castor sugar. I'll show you that a little bit later once we split our bean open. And castor sugar, although expensive to bring to this country, is not purified through bone char. So if anyone has a concern about that, you might like to see if you can find some.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that. I thought castor sugar just meant, on this side of the pond, sugar that was very finely ground. So super fine, super fine. So we, in this course, I mean, I have students in countries where they can get vegan castor sugar, not filtered through bone char. We take organic sugar and grind it very fine, maybe in a Vitamix or a spice grinder, and that would be the equivalent. So you're saying that's a better way to get your sugar scented.
It's a more
with
expensive
vanilla.
way.
If it's in. Well, if we grind our own, it isn't terribly much more expensive. Yeah. Okay, that's really good to know. Kathy, have there been any? I read recently that there were some wild cacao beans that were found in a jungle somewhere. Have there ever been, to your knowledge, any wild vanilla beans growing?
This is one of my favorite things of all times. Yes, we have orchid hunters, we have vanilla bean hunters. And 2 times I've had a really interesting experience just happening upon stories about finding that elusive wild vanilla. And just recently, I found myself on the phone at 8:30 on a Saturday night with somebody in Lima, Peru, who had written an article about a wild vanilla bean found in Bolivia. And the reason they found it is that a group of restaurateurs went to a market in Bolivia where indigenous people had been creating different foodstuffs to bring to market. And one of the people there was a man who was selling Melipona honey. Well, there's that bee again, right? And so when that bee is around, very often you're going to find vanilla. And somebody was overhearing the conversation and a couple of hours later came back with a handful of vanilla pods from a wildly growing vanilla orchid. They were the size of a banana. And when split open, even though they were green from the pods
Wow.
and not cured in any way, produced the most amazing and aromatic flavor and essence of vanilla imaginable. Not being grown yet in Bolivia in any way that they can bring them to market as a cash crop, but they are working on a program with the government and a couple of other financial supporters to bring that crop, because it just has such an enormous effect on the population when they can have something growing that will produce a living wage for multiple families. And
Wow,
Ethiopia
that's
has a
really
similar story.
fascinating.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And then just recently, about 4 weeks ago, I was talking to somebody who had found some vanilla in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian government is trying to create a program, and they're not ready to come to market yet either. But that's a story that bears watching, because that's pretty exciting to have that as also.
It is. Is there anything akin to fair trade in vanilla, production of vanilla?
Yes, and most of the big companies that we know of, the brand name vanillas that you see and have historically been larger players in the field, have programs of sustainability, fair trade. A lot of them are now becoming organically certified. And it's just another way to protect the environment, protect the workers who they are the ones who are doing all that hand pollination and the gathering and the drying before they come to market. So yes, it's a very big mission.
Yeah, I'm really that's a good thing to hear, because it's a whole production. How long on average does it take for a vanilla bean to get to the dried state? Does it depend on the type of bean?
They're all
Well,
picked
they're cured,
in
right?
their the process is that they're picked when they are green. The way to know when a vanilla bean is ready to be harvested is when the bottom of that green tip starts to turn yellow, and then there's a certain time that you want it to be yellow, but you can't let it split. Once it splits, you're not able to bring it to market. And so it's always that rush, rush, rush. And if you can imagine, just acres and acres of vanilla vines, and each of them has to be looked at every single day to see where they are in the production of the flower and then the bean and then the ripeness of the bean. And then they're picked, then they are dried. A lot of vanilla producers will do what's called killing the bean, which is sometimes they plunge it in hot water and it just stops the vegetation from continuing a growth, even though they are now off the flower. And then the drying process begins, which is putting them out in a field. I think we have a photo of drying vanilla beans out in a field. And every day they are spread out to dry in the sun. And every night they're rolled up and brought inside. So it's an incredibly laborious process
Wow.
of all day, all night. And so when they're rolled up and brought in at night, sometimes they're left in the fields wrapped in a plastic covering after they're rolled in the fabric, and they start to sweat, and that's part of the curing process, and it takes months for that to happen. And then finally they become leathery and dark, and they actually look oiled, although they're not, and they develop all of the flavors that we're looking for in our vanilla, and then they're brought to market. I think we
Yeah, it's
showed
quite a
a
process.
photo of, yeah, I think we showed a photo of tattooed vanilla beans. We want to bring that back. So vanilla, because it is such a highly prized crop, has a little bit of goings on. And so yes, you can see the little dots that you're looking at are actually tattoos on vanilla beans. And growers will mark their individual beans with their own emblems so that if they're stolen, which is really a problem in Madagascar, at least I'm sure other places, they'll be readily identified as belonging to them. So farmers sleep in their fields at
Wow.
night or hire guards to sleep in their fields at night because there is such a problem of theft in the vanilla world.
That is really fascinating, really fascinating. Well, I'm going to hold up some of the different vanillas that I have, and then I have some more questions for you, but I want to get to the questions in the Q&A as well. So I held this up at a live event some time ago, and someone said to me, "What did you do? Did you come into money? That's so much vanilla." I have been cutting back because of the price, although you told us coming down a little bit. I looked at this. I didn't rob a bank, but I use vanilla in everything. I feel like it rounds flavors out, and you'll let me know if that's the case. Nielsen Massey is a very well-known producer. And I looked at the label maybe for the first time, and it says ingredients: water, alcohol, sugar, vanilla bean extractive. So I wasn't really expecting to see the sugar in here. Whereas I have a vanilla from Trader Joe's. So some of you Americans know Trader Joe's. This is Bourbon Vanilla. The Nielsen Massey is Madagascar. And the ingredients are bourbon vanilla bean extractives in water and alcohol, no sugar. I also have this. I got this at a food show when we went to food shows from Watkins, which is another vanilla maker. But this is called baking vanilla. And it is water, sugar, glycerin, vanilla extract, alcohol, natural flavors, and fruit juice for color. So they're calling it baking vanilla. Would you call this vanillin or artificial vanilla?
If it has any vanilla in it at all, they can call it vanilla. If it doesn't, then it is artificial vanilla.
All right, so this has vanilla in it. Now,
yes,
I have been wanting to, when I want to boost vanilla flavor, for example, in this vanilla cream that I'm talking about, adding too much vanilla will dilute it will change the consistency. So I bought some double fold vanilla. This is from a company called Vanilla. And can you talk to us about the single fold, double fold, and triple fold vanillas, and what they are and when we might use them?
And Vanilla is one of my favorite brands. They make an excellent product, and you can also buy beans from them. So it's really nice if you want to take a look at that website. You can find some really interesting things. And so when we talk about extracts, there's a formula, and it's usually 1 ounce of vanilla to 8 ounces of alcohol. And in the United States, it has to have at least 35% alcohol to be called vanilla extract. And so a double fold is simply 2 ounces to that same 8 ounces, and triple fold 3 ounces of beans. And this is beans by weight. So you're not counting out vanilla beans to place into the alcohol.
Okay.
It is by weight. And it's very important that you make that differentiation.
Right.
And so
I'm finding that I like
flavor.
using this. Yeah, I like this very much. And I bought some, I've got, I went for a period of time without any vanilla beans. They were, it was $15 for 1 bean in the market, but this is 3 vanilla beans from Penzies, and they're from Madagascar. And I have 1 left from Vanilla, Madagascar. But the Vanilla site is very good. I'm sure that you've got some others for us. Now, I'm not going to open this because it will spill, but Singing Dog Vanilla is a company in the United States I liked very much. I liked their vanilla. I used it in New York in the cooking school. This is alcohol-free vanilla. And I would like to know about alcohol-free vanilla. I know that there are people who say they don't want any alcohol, people who are recovering alcoholics and don't believe that it burns off. Whether it does or not, I don't know. And this was certified gluten-free. I think some of these others are listed as gluten-free, but I'm not sure. So how do they extract the vanilla?
So extraction is a process of soaking the beans and then taking them out of their liquid and then drying them and then soaking them in a different liquid and then reintroducing them. And so it's a process that can take a year or so to get a good extraction. And so companies have a different method and different formula that they're using. But as I was mentioning, if it doesn't have alcohol in it, it's not considered an extract in this country. So it can be...
So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be thought of as an infusion. And I like Singing Dog as well. They have a really beautiful line of organic vanilla.
Right. They're really, it's a wonderful company. I'm going to go online and look and see what they call this non-alcoholic vanilla, because I think they call it vanilla extract, but that's very interesting to know. Thank you for that. So finally for me, I recently bought some vanilla paste, and the label said, and that's because I didn't have any beans or I didn't want to use my beans. And the label of this particular one, which is a private label, says ingredients: sugar, water, pure vanilla extract, natural flavor, and a gum. Are there some that don't have all of those ingredients?
Most of them do, because it needs to be in a suspension. What vanilla bean paste is ground up pods. They do that before they are made into an extract. So it's the actual vanilla bean. And I like it a lot. This is mine. You can see that I've used quite a bit of it. And it is used when you want to see the little flecks of vanilla, and it really does give a big burst of flavor, but you have to account for the sweetness of it.
Yeah, so that, it's thick looking. I have used it, and it gives you those beautiful flecks of beans and some flavor. So that big bottle of yours is vanilla paste? Wow.
This is vanilla
Now,
bean paste.
tell us about vanilla, ground vanilla or vanilla powder.
So this is one of my absolute favorite things. This was a nice little gift from Nielsen Massey, and I've used about that much of it. If this is not in its usual container, I can smell this a mile away. It is so incredibly fragrant. This is ground beans, the entire pod. This is a fortune to use. It's really a beautiful product. And let me show you this. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
And the aroma, but you see how dark that is. You can see that it's a powder. It's not something that's going to, gets all over your fingers. It's really nice. And big, gigantic flavor. But again, not inexpensive. It's much more expensive than an extract, because it is all the pods. And this would be something that would be a lesser quality vanilla bean that wouldn't take, I'm sorry, I got distracted with my vanilla rolling off the counter. That wouldn't quite make it into these beautiful little containers for selling individually. So nothing wrong with the quality. It's the appearance of them, which is also something that's prized, how big and plump and wonderful they look.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna start taking some questions here, and the vanilla questions for sure you're gonna get. So Cecilia would like to know, Kathy.
Go ahead, and then we have more show and tell.
All right. Do you make vanilla extract? And if so, what is your recipe? What's the best bean to make vanilla extract? And what's the best place to buy vanilla beans online? So Celia has 3 questions for you.
Do I make my own vanilla extract? I have vanilla extract that I am making. This was a gift at one of those food shows that Fran was talking about. This is a quadruple milled vodka, and I didn't like the flavor of it. And I had some beans that were dry and, as we say, tragic. And I just kept stuffing them into the bottle. This has been extracting, I'm going to say, easily 7 years. And I use it very sparingly. There are probably 25 beans in this bottle, and the flavor is indescribable. It's not an extraction, it's an infusion. And so to make your own infusion, and there is a difference, the ratio that I was talking about earlier, the 1 ounce to 8 ounces, 1 ounce of beans to 8 ounces of alcohol is what you're going to use. You can use anything you'd like. So if you'd like vodka, use vodka. If you like bourbon, absolutely, some Woodford or Maker's Mark or whatever you like. And you can even use tequila. Some people use Everclear. I think that the nice byproduct of making your own extraction is to be able to actually use the alcohol. If you were using Everclear, you probably wouldn't do that. Did I hit them all?
Okay. Well,
my favorite
you did.
bean?
Well, we already,
Yeah,
We
that's good.
also,
The
we
bean
already
that you use is
mentioned
going to be up to
vanilla.
you. Mhm.
Right. So maybe when we go back to Kathy with some more show and tell, she can give us some other places to buy beans online. Um, Terry B says she's looking forward to a better understanding of the difference between the liquid and the paste. She does make her own vanilla, but hasn't attempted it. I think, Terry, do you mean you haven't attempted making the paste, is what I think. So Kathy just gave us a recipe for making vanilla. Kathy, can people make their own paste?
If they want all those additives, they can, but you need some
Okay.
viscous solution, we'll say. So it can be a gum, it can be corn syrup, a lot of people use, but it is going to need that delivery
Oh,
system.
all right. Now, thank you for that. So Tony F says, with most vanilla products being processed, some more than others, are any of these suitable for whole food plant-based diets? Well, Tony, it should just be, it depends on where you are in the whole food plant-based diet world. You can choose a vanilla that doesn't have any sugar. I had a couple there that didn't have any sugar. So and we use so little. I mean, use a teaspoon or maybe a tablespoon in a vanilla cake. I think that it would be absolutely fine. And I see Chef Shar is here, and Shar is a real expert, Chef Shar, in the whole food plant-based world, so she may have something to say about that. But Shar wants to know, does alcohol-free glycerin-based vanilla affect the outcome of a baked dish when used as an ingredient? So Kathy, I'm going to ask you to take that question.
Alcohol-free vanilla extract?
Yeah, alcohol-free glycerin-based vanilla. Does it affect the outcome of a baked dish when used as an ingredient?
Not essentially, no. And we always say that be careful of when you're using vanilla like that. You want to know the strength of it because it's unregulated as the extracts are regulated, so you know exactly what you're going to get. And so bake something small, or as we said earlier, put it in a sauce or a custard of some dimension, and you'll find what tastes good or not. The
Right.
problem is that when we were talking about this earlier, that if it's not giving you the really pow vanilla flavor that you're looking for, the tendency is to want to use more. And if it's in a liquid compound, it will offset whatever you're baking because you're going to have your ratio disturbed of liquid to solid ingredients such as your flours, etc. And so in that case, you can use powder, the ground powder, or even scrape a vanilla bean.
Well, that's a good idea. Well, sure, I can say, sure, that I have used the alcohol-free glycerin-based vanilla extract in many of my baked dishes or my desserts because I have people who I'm baking for who want me to use that. And I haven't had a problem with it. But I think if you have to use a lot, what Kathy said makes sense. Regina wants to know what brand is the best quality vanilla extract. So do you have something to say about that, Kathy? I mean, I just showed a
I
number
have
and
some
I like
favorites.
them all.
Yes, I think that the
The
Trader Joe's
best
is
quality,
fine. Usually it's a blend
really?
of different beans. If it says Madagascar, it has to be from Madagascar. So the different types of vanilla, you find what you like. If you like a Mexican vanilla, not easy to find Mexican extract because they don't really import that, but you can find the beans here. I actually have a Mexican vanilla bean here to show you. I do like Nielsen Massey. It's a flavor from my childhood. I gravitate toward it, but I just love the Halala vanilla, which I've been using for, I'm going to say 10 years, 12 years. You can see that this bottle has an actual bean in it, which they don't do anymore because an individual Tahitian vanilla bean is probably now $20, which would make buying a
Wow.
bottle like this completely cost prohibitive. Yes, so this is,
Where do
I
you
have
find that?
refilled this bottle. Halala is readily available now. They've revamped, and this is one of the companies that has at their core a mission for sustainability and fair trade. So that's another reason, aside from really delicious vanilla, a reason to use that company. Rodal has
Right.
a really wonderful program, and they are ubiquitous. They're on every Price Club, all of the big box warehouse stores. You can find that very easily, as well as online, of course. And that's a really committed brand as well. Rain's
Okay.
Choice,
Well,
another one.
so there are a lot of nice vanillas. Maybe we can compile a list and get it together for people, and then you can find Kathy on Instagram, DM her, and she will have a list for you. And I'm going to want that list as well. Although I'm pretty set for a while. Dana said she couldn't hear you. She couldn't hear when you said what your favorite bean to work with is. Did you say that you had a
I
particular
didn't.
favorite?
I will, and I'll tell you. And I
Yeah.
always want to use the Tahitian vanilla bean. When you smell them, it's so floral and so pungent and so rich. I always think I'm going to like it. And this is such a funny thing. Every time I do, I'm always sorry that I did. It might be my least favorite bean, although I love the aroma of them. I do like the Madagascar bourbon beans, and I do like the Mexican vanilla beans as well. And the Mexican vanilla beans, and as you can imagine, all of the vanilla beans have such an incredible flavor to them and different tasting notes. And so, depending on what the orchid is, but even if it's the same orchid being grown someplace else, other than, we'll say, the Madagascar vanilla bean grown in another country, there's the terroir to
Right,
encounter
of
as well.
course.
So different tasting notes, and it's just really what you like. So we say that the
Right. I
Mexican
mean,
vanilla has a spicy character rather than the sweet and creamy flavors of the Madagascar bourbon. And then the Tahitian vanilla is very floral and fruity, and you might even pick up notes of cherry and almond. So it's really what you like.
okay. Justina couldn't hear the your favorite brand, which I think was the last one that I can't pronounce. Can you spell that for us, Kathy?
Certainly. It's Heilala, and it's pronounced Heilala, and it's from New Zealand.
Ah, there you go. I
And
hope that helps you, Justina.
beautiful. So they do also have vanilla
So,
bean paste,
yeah,
and I used to have a tiny little jar of it that, even when empty, I never threw it away. Every time you're feeling like you need a little pick me up, just open the jar and give it a whiff, and you're bouncing back.
that sounds really good. Chris says, where do you suggest sourcing vanilla beans? Locally, they're sold at the grocer for $15 for one bean. I think we touched on that, but we can talk about that again. So, Kathy, you have some resources for shopping. I'm assuming mostly online, but maybe not.
If you have a local Penzies, they have beautiful vanilla beans, and I do buy a lot of them from Penzies if I need one or two of vanilla that I don't usually stock. I will tell you that you need to be extremely careful. I'm going to show you. We talked about tragic things earlier. I just want to show you, if I can get this out of here, what not to do. You have to know your purveyor, because if you don't, you can end up with a vanilla bean in a tube, which is the preferred way to store them, with a proper stopper. However, that is what you don't want. That little
Oh,
snap like
that's
that
what
as
you
it
don't
breaks in
want.
half. Your vanilla should be pliable, should be able to wrap it right around your finger. And so you have to really know where you're buying your beans. And I would say that
Okay.
all of the big marketers, such as Vanilla, is beautiful, and Penzies, and you can even, I think, Nielsen Massey might have a storefront. I'm not sure. I will tell you, though, that if you have those tragic beans, never get rid of them. This is a bunch of really brittle, throw them in the trash kind of beans. I stuffed them into this jar, filled it from the bottom, and I did actually pour cognac in here just because I was feeling like that. The beans just absorbed it all. And now I'm at the point, I had 7 of these. Somebody gave me 2 pounds of really brittle, awful beans, and they all made their way into
Wow.
those jars. Now you can see that from that, they are pliable and beautiful and soaked in that cognac. And so hoarding these now, and then just split them down the middle and use them as you would use any vanilla bean. But that's a good way to restore beans that have gone too far.
So you put the dried beans into a jar, but you put just a small amount of liquid. in the bottom and they
I would
soaked it up. Is that
say
correct?
maybe a half an inch. And that's completely gone,
Okay.
but the beans are fabulous, ready to use.
All right.
But
So
then I want to show you something.
that was, I was going to say that you just answered Kate P asked a question. What's the best way to store the beans? What's the shelf life? And well, the dried out part. So now, Kate, you know how to dry them out. What is the best way to store them so that tragedy doesn't happen? Well, let's not say tragedy, but they don't get
So for
dried
your
out.
fresh beans, yeah, for my fresh beans, I have them in a bag that I can suck the air out of. They have handheld food savers now. Then I roll them and put them in 2 more zipper bags and then into an airtight container. I don't want them to end up like that. We don't like tragic beans.
Yeah.
So it's really,
Well,
if you can smell your vanilla beans, you need to rewrap them.
oh, that's a really great tip. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Kate. Dory wants to know, does vanilla flavor intensity vary by region? And if so, which region produces the most flavorful vanilla? Thank you for that question, Dory.
So if we're back to terroir and talking about that and where they're growing. So if your beans are being grown in Uganda, in Papua New Guinea, in New Zealand, in China, or even in Florida, I know Dory's in Florida, there's a vanilla program there, or even Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, depending on where you are, each bean has to have a certain component. And it's all about how the growers are drying them and how then the manufacturers are storing them, if they're selling fresh beans, or if they're making extract, what their extraction process is. And so it's really a matter of your tasting each of these and finding what works for you. It's all subjective, what you're going to find.
Yes, of course. Of course. Sarah is asking about a substitute for eggs and oil. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute, Sarah, because Chris wants to know about vanilla paste. Do you recommend it as a substitute for vanilla bean or vanilla extract? What conversions do you make?
If I'm going to use vanilla bean paste, it's because I want to see the vanilla bean. I want people to know that that's what's in there, and it just gives a luxurious feeling. I go in the same quantity. So if I'm using a teaspoon, I'll use a teaspoon of paste. So equal parts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So Sheila asked that as well. So Sheila and Chris, you should see that. It's the same, but that's why I bought the paste, to have the flex, to really have the flex. So now I'm going to take Sarah's question. What's the best substitute for eggs and oil? What should I always have in my pantry? Sarah, that is a gigantic question. In Essential Vegan Desserts syllabus, we have a whole unit on substituting eggs and fat, which oil is fat. And I will say that there is no one size fits all. So I can't give you a full answer now. I will tell you that, here I am saying, because I get this question all the time, how do you substitute eggs? And I say, it depends on your recipe. Well, not too long ago, you can Google self.com egg replacement. And I was asked to contribute to this article, as were several other pastry chefs. And it was fascinating to me because we all had somewhat different ideas. There is a proportion of flax or chia ground and water that can be an egg replacer. Some people are using aquafaba as an egg replacer. There's commercial egg replacer. When I had moved from the traditional pastry kitchen, that's how I trained, to the vegan pastry kitchen, there were no egg replacers available. And I used baking powder, baking soda, vinegar, chemical leaveners, and it worked. In terms of eliminating the fat, you have to play around. You're not going to get the same result, but you can get a result. Many people like to use a fruit paste. And about the eggs, I think it's very difficult when you go beyond 2 or 3. So Sarah, I hope that answered your question. I don't want you to feel like it's not possible, because it's absolutely possible. My cakes are terrific. Migs, hi Migs, it's good to see you. Mix wants to know, Kathy, have you ever used Inga, I-N-G-A beans instead of vanilla? If yes, are they good? Are they a good alternative?
Inga beans are from, I believe, Australia, and they're used primarily in making things that don't really require actual vanilla. They are said to have a vanilla flavor of themselves, and so used as an ingredient, you'll find that flavor, but in no way comparable to vanilla extract or paste or whole vanilla beans. And so it's just a quick way to do it. But I think that if you're going to use that, you'll be disappointed in the outcome.
Okay, well, Migs is really an alchemist, and I believe she's in Australia. Australia or New Zealand? I don't quite remember, but down under.
Oh, then you
Um,
maybe know.
yeah, Catherine Z says, I wait to, oh, thank you for asking this question, Catherine, because it was one of the questions I forgot to ask Chef Kathy Gold. I wait to add vanilla until after a custard has been cooked because I've heard the flavor will dissipate if heated. Is that because of the volatile flavor compounds? Is there a certain temperature vanilla can be heated to and no more for best results? I've wondered about that too. I always, in my recipes, I wait until a mixture has come to a boil or cooked or is very hot to add the vanilla. Is that for real or is that a wives' tale?
No, I do too. A lot of people will add it during the process of boiling because it's an alcohol issue. They want to burn that alcohol off. And if you think that that works, then it does because it does take care of a lot of it. But I do also wait until it's slightly cooler to add my vanilla. But you want to make sure that there is still warmth in there because it blooms the flavor so that you don't have that raw, punchy flavor of vanilla that you often find.
Uh-huh. Thank you, Kathy. So that was a great question. Thank you, and a really great answer. Okay, now Margarita is asking which dairy-free product is best for desserts and everyday cooking that doesn't have too much of a vegan or nutty flavor. I find I like oat milk best, but it can be too sweet, even unflavored, and I have concerns with wheat gluten allergies. Um, you know, there are so many plant milks. I think that depending on what the grain or the flake or the nut is, your plant milk can have a flavor that is nutty. Or, in terms of hemp milk, it can taste a little vegetal. I don't think they taste vegan. They don't taste like dairy milk. I happen to like oat milk. I like Oatly oat milk the best, but that's me. And frankly, you may find this too vegan. I like soy milk, almond milk. Try different brands and try making them yourself because sometimes when you make them yourself, you can get a different flavor profiles. Wheat and gluten shouldn't be a problem with plant milk, especially if you make it yourself. Myra, there are no silly questions. Myra says she has a silly question from the Netherlands, but are vanilla beans and vanilla pods the same thing?
We talk about vanilla pods as the entire fruit, and the beans is what's inside, although what's inside is often called caviar as well. There's tiny little black flecks.
Yeah.
And so either way, right.
Okay. So that's a good answer. Thank you. Now let me see. I'm scrolling to make sure. Regina wants to know if I can recommend a good vegan white chocolate brand. Vegan white chocolate is coming around. It's a little difficult still. I had been using the chips. I think they're called King David. They're kosher. They're very waxy. There are some I don't like that I have tasted, but that are readily available. So you're going to have to go to a large market. You will definitely see white chocolate and see what you think. I mean, I had some sent to me. I don't want to say the brand because it's a personal choice, but I gave this to my young grandsons who like white chocolate and they said, ick, it tastes like plastic. So you'll have to do some tasting, Regina. Catherine, I'm glad you're back. And I'm glad that you're joining us. So I'm going to take another question, one more for Kathy, and then Kathy's going to show us how to split a vanilla bean properly and get the caviar out. And then I'm going to ask you, well, we know with what's left, we can make vanilla sugar or we can grind it up. So the last question I'm going to take for now, Jen wants to know, when you make your own extract, do you scrape the beans out of the pods to get the 1 ounce, or do you use the whole bean? So what do you say, Kathy?
Use the entire bean, and then you can, after the beans are finished, you can either make a second extraction. And I think I mentioned that usually when you're doing an extract, it's going to take a year for the optimal flavor to come through. Then you can reuse the beans, or then you can scrape them and do something with them, at which point they'll be infused with whatever liquor you've used and put them in a dish.
Oh, that's fascinating. So after they've done their work to make the infusion, you can use the caviar that's inside. Oh, I bet that'd be really interesting.
Yes. And
Yum.
a lot of
so
people
you're really able to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I was going to say, if you're interested in making extractions, you can do a lot of different extractions, use different vanilla beans, maybe have 5 going at once, 1 Tahitian, 1 Mexican, Madagascar. You can use Tonga beans, whatever you find that you like. And once you have your year extraction where it's going to be optimal, it doesn't really develop much more after that. I don't know what's going on in my 6-year-old bottle. Then you can take those beans and put them in what people call a mother jar. And that's going to be a larger jar that, once you've taken your used beans from your first extraction, make a blend of everything that you've done and just fill that, make sure your beans are covered, and just keep that going. So every time you've used your beans for your first quantity, add them to one jar, and then you'll have a really beautiful second batch. And you can keep topping that off with whatever vodka or tequila or whatever you happen to be using.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really great. You know, my head is swimming now with all this information, but I think we have a recipe in Essential Vegan Desserts for making vanilla, for making your own vanilla.
And remember that ratio where you can make your own double fold and triple fold if you're doing your own extraction. Right. So that's kind of exciting.
Right. Exactly. Catalina says vanilla taste is very strong in food. How would you reduce the taste, or does it depend? Add less. Just add less if you know vanilla to you feels too strong. I know one of my former students, who is a friend now in Philadelphia, Lauren, likes to make a vanilla cake from one of my first books, and she said when the price went high, she said, "Fran, you have 3 tablespoons of vanilla in there. I don't do that too much anymore." So Kathy, would you like to show us now how to scrape the caviar out of the bean?
Absolutely. And so I have 3 beans. I hope that you can see them on my countertop. And I have a Mexican vanilla bean, which is this long one, then the Madagascar vanilla bean, and then this beautiful, really plump, wonderful Tahitian vanilla bean. And so we'll do this Madagascar. And again, we want our beans to be very pliable. And put it down on your cutting board, have a very sharp knife. If you want to, you can use the back of your knife to flatten it out a little bit. It makes cutting it a little bit easier. And then try to aim for the middle. Just take your knife tip and cut all the way through, right down the middle. I'm going to do half of this bean just to show you. Straight through the middle, just like that. And then you open both sides. And now I do this with the back of the knife so that I'm not cutting into the bean. Take the back of the knife and scrape. And here's all your vanilla caviar. And then do the same thing to the other side. So what we like to do when we're making a custard that we're using, or whatever we're making with our bean, you put the whole thing in the pod as well as the caviar and infuse it. Then we take out the pod and we give it a good rinse, especially if it's been in oat milk or some other kind of custard, and dry it. Once it's dried, it's really nice to then place it in your sugar jar. I have a friend who was doing a class for me, and she said that she takes her beans and just grinds them into her sugar. And I said, but then you've used it once. And if you put it in your sugar jar, you have flavored vanilla, as I mentioned earlier, in 3 days. If you just keep adding beans every time you make it and just keep refilling your sugar jar, you'll have something pretty exquisite in a very short time. There's an almost infinite capacity for your used up pods once you've scraped the vanilla. Just give it a good shake to keep flavoring your sugar. So just keep adding sugar to it. I would take this as well, and it will dry in pretty quickly. Put that right into my jar.
Well, thank you. I love that tip of flattening the vanilla bean before you go and take the seeds or caviar out. And you just helped me out because I did that. I had a couple yesterday or sometime this week, and my scrape bean got wet, and I just dried it out, and it still smells so much like vanilla. It's just wonderful. So now I'm going to start flavoring my sugar. Dana wants to know how you make vanilla powder. And Dana, tell me if I'm wrong, Kathy, but Kathy said, Chef Gold said, you just grind up your vanilla beans. And Regina wants to know, how long do vanilla beans last?
If you keep your vanilla beans as sealed as I was talking about, they'll last a long time. But because they are so volatile and so easily dried out, if you're not taking the utmost care, I would really not store a big quantity of vanilla beans unless you have a project that you're going to be using them for. Buy them as you need them, if that makes sense to you. One of the things we talk about is it's hard with the pandemic to be with friends, but there are a lot of co-ops where you can buy mass quantities of beans for a lot lower price and then divide them amongst yourselves if you're using a lot of vanilla. I have to show you something really funny though. Nielsen Massey sent these to us. This is a little dropper when the price of vanilla went through the roof a couple of years ago. Oh, so that you can have a drop of vanilla because it was so expensive that's all anyone was going to get. So that was really kind of cute.
That's really funny. That's like an aged balsamic where they serve it with a dropper. Thank you for that. Catherine wants to know, is the fresh vanilla edible before the curing process?
It doesn't have any of the intense flavors that we're looking for. So it's really not useful in that way. Although the beans that I was talking about that were found in Bolivia, the chef who took the 3 or 4 beans that they found did make an extraction, and she made some tea and infused it in some alcohol and said it was delicious, even though it wasn't cured in any way. So there is some flavor to it, but nothing like what you're going to get after they've been properly cured and stored.
Right. Thank you. Robbie is asking if we can get a link to the companies. You know what, Robbie? You can reach Kathy, Chef Gold, on her Instagram, Chef Kathy Gold, or In the Kitchen Cooking School, and she can send you links, or you can write to me, Fran@rouxbe.com, and I'll get the links and get them to you. But Lily is asking, are you familiar with La Faza, which sells ground vanilla, and it's amazing? I'm not familiar with it.
No, I've not heard of it, but I'll certainly look it up. Yeah,
so we're going to look that up. Thank you for that. We can all help each other out with resources. Sheila says she has some vanilla paste, but she's not sure if it's 1-to-1. Yes, it's a 1-to-1 substitution, according to Chef Gold, for extract. And Kathy, what are your thoughts on Hawaiian vanilla? We have a couple of producers on Hawaii Island. Pre-COVID, they even offered tours of the farm.
I've had Hawaiian vanilla and it is exquisite. I love it, but not marketed it more than as a tourist sale. So it's not enough to be shipping it anywhere, but if you find it, use it. It's really gorgeous vanilla.
Oh, Shelley, I think you're in Hawaii and I'm feeling a little bit jealous. Rose wants to know, this is for me. Do you have a specific brand of straight-sided pans for layer cakes? Not a specific brand. I have a few different ones. I like a pan that's got some weight to it. And I like, if I have two, well, I have way more than two, but I want my 9-inch pans, for example, to be this from the same manufacturer, my 8-inch and so on. So, you can go into a kitchenware store and ask for advice or go online and see what other people have to say. Sheila is asking, if you are using triple fold vanilla, do you reduce the amount to 1/3 of what the recipe calls for? So what do you say,
No, not at all.
Kathy?
That's the whole. No, use it exactly as it instructs you to do. That's the entire point of the double and triple fold vanilla is the just beyond belief flavor, the depth that you're going to get from it. So if it says a teaspoon, use a teaspoon of the triple fold. That's a nice thing to have around.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna get some now because I'm so happy with the double fold that I mean I really see the point of it. It gives you such a punch in vanilla flavored. I mean, if I'm doing a ganache, for example, a chocolate ganache, and I often will add a small amount of vanilla extract, then I use a single fold. But when I'm making a vanilla cake or a cream or something like that, then I go on. We're gonna take a couple more minutes. Do you have any more show and tell for us, Chef Gold, or have
I
we seen everything
I
now?
think I think you've seen it all. I will tell you a funny story about one of my favorite vanilla encounters, which was at one of the fancy food shows at the Jacob Javits Center in New York, and a company from France had a really wonderful display of balsamic vinegar, and I'm thinking of it because Chef Fran mentioned balsamic vinegar mixed with vanilla. And they saw a brand new company. They had all of their packaging and labeling. It was really lovely and had a huge line, but no way for anyone to taste anything. But they did have a spray bottle. So they ended up pouring it into a spray bottle. And we were all standing in a line with our mouths open, and they were squirting the balsamic vinegar that had been mixed in the most perfect ratio that I dream about into our mouths as we waited. And I think that something happened with the company. I never found them again. They had no literature, they had no cards, they had no contact information, but it was really a fun experience to have that. So that's another
Oh, I
example
would.
of what you can do with your salad dressing. So great.
I have learned so much. I want to thank you so much, Chef Gold. And Susan says thank you too. Now, about the recipe that you have in the document, I want to show you. This is, we call this in the course a vanilla pastry cream. It's cashew based. I put it in a raw crust. It's the crust, for those of you who are in the course, that is the crust, the raw crust developed by Wicked Healthy Chad Sarno for the chocolate ganache tart. Because I was using a cream with vanilla in it, I didn't want to use the chipotle powder that's in the crust. So I used a tablespoon of organic sugar. I didn't use the maple sugar or the coconut sugar. I wanted it to be more neutral. And I added some lemon zest. Now, I am 100%, believe it or not, out of fruit except for apples. So I couldn't put anything on my tart. But for people in the course who say, gee, my cream wasn't very firm, you can see that this is very firm. This one was made without the agar. The cream is made with agar, which is a gelling agent, and it's used in vegan cuisine instead of bovine gelatin, and some guar gum, and they work synergistically. This time I wanted to make more of a pouring cream, so I used just some guar, and I could really mix in, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to take some of this vanilla bean paste and mix it in. And I think I would probably have to whisk it in, but yeah. So now there are definitely flakes in here. One tip I want to give you about making this cream, for those of you who might be making it, is it's you want to get it out of your high-speed blender while the cream is warm. It becomes very thick, unless you leave out the agar and the gum and you have a pouring cream. It's very versatile. I don't like food waste at all. So what I do before I wash the blender, I can't get all of the cream out, is I add some water or some plant milk and I let it rip. And then I have this delicious tasting vanilla water or cream or milk, and I will add some vanilla to that if I want to after it's hot. So that's something that you can do with that. You want to make sure that the cashews are very, very well drained. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and the questions were great. Thank you for those. I want to thank my friend, Chef Kathy Gold. What a lot of information you gave us. And thank you so much. I really hope that I'll see everyone back here in April. We don't have a topic picked yet, but we will. Kathy, this is only in 3 years, the third time I've had a guest, and you were fabulous. Thank you so much, Chef Gold, my friend, and I can't wait to see you in real life. Everyone else, stay safe, stay well. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again soon.